Everyone has a line they thought would never get crossed. Like finding out your partner had a whole second family, or discovering your spouse has been cheating after 15 years of thinking everything was fine in your relationship. Well, I went deep into Reddit to find the most unbelievable cheating stories, so you don't have to. And I'll read them to you while I hunt down the best loot this Minecraft world has to offer and take on the Ender Dragon. Here we go. First story. She hid a burner phone inside a book. We had been married for 6 years, and I genuinely thought I knew every corner of that house. Every drawer, every shelf, every habit she had built into our routine. Things were not perfect between us, but they were normal, and normal had started to feel like enough. I was tidying the bookshelf on a Saturday afternoon while she was out running errands. A book near the back fell, and I caught it before it hit the floor. The weight was wrong. It was too heavy for a paperback that size. I turned it over and realized it was not a real book at all. It was a hollow storage box made to look like one. Inside it was a phone, a prepaid phone fully charged with a passcode on it. I stood in the middle of our living room holding this thing, and I did not move for a long time. I do not know how I got into it. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, a couple of other things, and eventually one of them worked. What was inside, I was not ready for. Messages going back over a year. His name, her name, things she had said to him that she had never once said to me. Plans they had made, things that had happened in our house while I was at work. I did not call her. I did not text her. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, sat down on the couch, and just breathed. For a long time, I just sat there and breathed. Over the following week, I read everything twice, and I started printing. Messages organized by date, the whole picture laid out in chronological order. I consulted a solicitor on the Tuesday. She had no idea. I came home every evening that week and sat across from her at dinner and asked how her day was. On the Friday, I came home before her, laid every single printed page across the kitchen table, and drove to my brother's house. I did not leave a note. I let her walk into that kitchen and figure it out herself. She knew immediately what it meant. The solicitor had already started the paperwork by Monday morning. Wow, guys, that was intense. So there was a follow-up to this one. A few days later, he came back with an update. His solicitor had advised him not to go into detail publicly, but he returned to say the divorce was moving forward and she had not contested anything. He also said she had tried to tell him the phone was not what it looked like. Even then, even with every printed page laid out on the table, she still tried it. I do not know which part is harder to get your head around. A year of hiding a second phone inside a fake book, or trying to explain it away when the evidence is physically in front of you. Like, where do you even go from there? And spending a week reading everything before saying a single word. Most people would have called the moment they found it. Choosing to know the full picture before opening your mouth, that is a different kind of person entirely. Okay, this next one has a clock running in the background, and it does not stop until the very last second. I canceled the wedding by group text. Everything about that month felt like the version of my life I had always pictured. We had been together for 4 years. The venue was booked. Both families had flown in, and I was genuinely the happiest I had ever been. I mean that. I was not nervous. I was ready. She went to her bachelorette party on the Thursday, 4 days before we were supposed to get married. I stayed home with her brother and a few of my mates and kept it low-key because I wanted to be present for the weekend. I went to bed around midnight and there was a message waiting from one of her friends. No caption, just a video. I watched it twice, then a third time. It was her, at the bar, with someone I had never seen before, and it was not ambiguous. There was nothing I could explain away or decide was probably nothing. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and lay there in the dark for the rest of the night. I did not sleep. I did not cry. I just lay there. In the morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. Deposits paid, flights already landed. 140 people expecting to watch me get married in 4 days. I wrote down every single thing that would need canceling, and I sat with that list for 2 days before I did anything. She came home from the bachelorette acting completely normal, excited, talking about the weekend. I said nothing. I smiled and I said nothing. I do not know how I did it. I honestly do not know where that came from. On the Saturday morning, I sent one group text, both families at the same time. I said the wedding was canceled, I was sorry for the inconvenience, and that I would not be explaining further at this time. Then I turned my phone off and drove to my dad's house 3 hours away. Her family rang my mom for days calling me cold, saying I should have spoken to her first, saying whatever happened could be worked through. Okay guys, it looks like this one got an update too, about 2 weeks later. She had reached out through a mutual friend, admitting what happened and saying it was a one-time mistake she would regret forever. His response was short. He said he believed her that it was once. He also said it did not change anything. Yeah, once is a completely reasonable place to draw the line 4 days before your wedding. The timing is what makes this one what it is. She was 4 days away and she still did it. And the group text to both families simultaneously with no explanation and then immediately turning the phone off. His mom and her mom reading the same message at the same moment while he was already on a motorway going the other direction. I could not have held it together for 2 whole days. Sitting across from someone knowing what I knew and just acting normal. I would have lasted about 3 hours before my face gave everything away. This next one, the discovery is quieter, but what it makes you picture once you know is something else entirely. His affair partner hugged me at our party. James and I had been together for 3 years before he proposed. Good years, mostly. We had our rough patches, like anyone does, but nothing that made me genuinely worried about us. He proposed at a restaurant in front of friends, and I said yes without hesitating. He had a female friend from work, I will call her Dana, who he had mentioned a few times over the years. Just a name that came up occasionally. She was invited to our engagement party because he said it would be strange not to include her given how close they were. I remember hugging her at the door. She brought wine and a card. She stood in our living room and talked to his mom for 20 minutes. I have a photo of the 3 of us from that night. 8 months after the engagement, I received a direct message from Dana. She told me they had been together for the entire duration of our relationship. Not a brief thing, not a mistake. The whole time. She said she was telling me because she could not watch me walk down the aisle without saying something. She had come to our engagement party knowing everything. She had stood in our living room. She had hugged me at the door and she already knew. I forwarded the message to James without a word. He called immediately. I let it ring out. He called 7 more times. I had already rung my mom and asked her to come over. By the time James got home that evening, most of my things were already in bags. He admitted it. There was not much else he could do. He cried, and I remember thinking that was very inconvenient for him. Yeah, I do not know what to say with this one. This stings on so many different levels. The engagement party detail is what separates this from everything else. She stood at a celebration of their future together and smiled for photographs. That is the version that gets under your skin in a way the rest of it does not. And forwarding the message without a word was the right call. What is there to even say? You send it and you let him reckon with the fact that the person he thought was his secret just ended it for him. Right, this next one is a completely different kind of double life, and the way it comes out is what makes it so hard to process. My boyfriend of 3 years had a wife. I want to start by saying I am not someone who misses things. I am observant, I pay attention, and in 3 years, I had not once had a real reason to question him. He was consistent. He texted back quickly. He remembered things. He came to family dinners and met my friends. For 3 years, he was just my boyfriend, and I trusted that without question. The message came on a Tuesday afternoon from a woman I had never heard of. She said her name, and then she said she was his wife. She said they had 2 children, that she had found my number in his phone, and that she was sorry to do it this way, but she needed me to know. I sat in my car in a car park for 45 minutes before I could respond to anything. I had his last text open in another tab. He had texted me that morning asking what I wanted for dinner. I called him. He picked up on the second ring. I told him I had heard from his wife. There was a pause, and then he said her name like it was a question, like the surprising part was that she had contacted me. He tried to explain. I genuinely cannot tell you what he said, because my brain stopped taking in words about 30 seconds in. He went for maybe 4 minutes, and then I hung up. What I pieced together afterwards was that he had 2 completely separate lives running in parallel. Different part of the city, different social circle, a routine built around the gaps in each world. For 3 years, I had been the part that fit between the other one. His wife and I spoke once on the phone, briefly. She was not angry with me. I was not angry with her. We were both just very tired. Oh goody, looks like this one also had an update. A couple of weeks later, she posted that she had heard through a mutual contact that he had tried to reach out to both of them separately to explain himself. She had blocked him. She said she hoped the other woman had done the same. She had. The 2 kids detail is what makes this one crazy. There is the affair, and then there is the whole architecture of a parallel existence that had to be maintained every single day. Birthdays, school events, 2 completely separate versions of himself running at the same time. And the wife not being angry with her. Most people expect that call to go a very different way. The fact that it was just 2 tired people having a quiet conversation is somehow the saddest version of it. Okay, this next one is a completely different flavor of what people will do, and I say that knowing that is an understatement. He told everyone they had an open marriage. 4 years of marriage and a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. Not a small town exactly, but the kind of place where you wave at people on the street and know whose car belongs to whom. I genuinely liked that about where we lived. It felt like a life I had chosen on purpose. A friend of a friend pulled me aside at a backyard gathering and asked me something I did not understand at first. She said she wanted to check in because she had heard we had an open arrangement and wanted to make sure I was okay with everything. I told her I did not know what she was talking about. She went very still. Then she said my husband had mentioned it to several people in our social circle over the past few months. Not as gossip, as a matter of fact. He had been telling people we had mutually agreed to an open marriage. I excused myself from the conversation. I found a quiet corner of the garden and stood there trying to work out whether I had somehow forgotten a conversation that had never happened. I had not forgotten it. It had never happened. When I confronted him that night, he initially acted confused. He said he had not meant it the way people took it. He said it came up in a conversation and got misrepresented. I pushed. He held that line for about 4 minutes, and then it collapsed entirely. He admitted he had been telling people for months and had hoped I would come around to the idea over time. He had decided on a version of our marriage, told our entire community about it, and apparently been operating under it, all on the assumption that I would eventually just accept it as reality. The community aspect is what makes this one so specifically awful. The one-on-one betrayal is bad enough on its own, but everyone around you knowing, making small talk, acting normal, while holding something about your own life that you do not know. That is a different category of humiliation entirely. And the logic of just telling everyone first and hoping she would catch up to it eventually. He built the lie and assumed the truth would fill in underneath it at some point. That is a very particular kind of thinking. Drop a comment if you have ever met someone bold enough to try something like that, because I genuinely have questions. This next one is quieter on the surface, but it gets more unsettling the longer you think about it. I read everything and stayed silent for a week. 11 years of marriage. 2 kids in primary school. A house we had renovated together over 6 years. By most measures, we were doing well. We argued less than we used to and had settled into a routine I think we both appreciated, even if neither of us said so out loud. I found it by accident. I was using her laptop to print something and a tab was already open. It took me about 3 seconds to understand what I was looking at. I closed the tab, went and printed what I needed, came back, sat down, and opened it again. I read everything on that screen and then kept going for about 2 hours. My first instinct was to walk straight into the kitchen and say her name. I actually stood up and took 2 steps before I stopped myself. Some part of me knew that if I walked in there in that moment, I would say something that ended everything before I actually understood the full picture. So I sat back down. Over the next 7 days, I read everything accessible to me. I went back through months of it, took notes, and built a timeline. On the Thursday, I called a solicitor from my car during my lunch break and had a 30-minute conversation she knew nothing about. Every evening that week, I came home, asked about her day, sat with the kids at dinner, and acted completely normally. It was not a performance exactly. It was more like I had split into 2 people and one of them just kept going. On the Sunday, I asked her to sit down and I laid out what I knew in the order I knew it, calmly, with the timeline on my phone. I gave her room to say whatever she wanted to say. She said she was sorry. She said a lot of things after that, but sorry came first, and I think it was the only one that meant anything. He returned to the thread about a month later. He did not say much. He said the process was ongoing and the kids were doing as well as could be expected. He said the week of silence before the conversation was the right call because it meant he walked in knowing more than she expected, and that changed everything about how it went. I genuinely do not think I could do what he did. Sitting across from someone for 7 days, making normal conversation, eating dinner together, knowing. That kind of composure does not come naturally to most people. And calling a solicitor before saying a single word to her, he was not reacting. He was preparing. By the time that conversation happened, he was already 3 steps ahead and she had no idea. All right, this next one has a similar kind of cold precision to it, but the specific move at the end is very different. I printed it all out and quietly left. We had been together for 8 years and married for 3 of them. We had talked about having kids. We had looked at houses in better school districts. Everything about our life together pointed forward. And that is what made finding it so disorienting. There was no part of me that had been looking. I found the messaging app by chance. She had left herself logged in on the family tablet we used for recipes. I picked it up to find something, and there it was. I read long enough to know exactly what it was, and then I put the tablet down and went for a drive. I came back an hour later and read everything. Every message, every exchange, going back 7 months. Then I did something I still do not fully understand. I started printing. I printed every conversation, organized them by date, and stacked them on the kitchen table in chronological order. The neatest pile I have ever made. Then I texted my brother and drove away before she was home from work. I did not leave a note. The table would do that for me. She called within 20 minutes of getting home. I did not answer. She called 11 times that night. I sat in my brother's spare room and watched my phone light up and did not move. I went home on the Monday. She had read everything because the pages were no longer in order. She had been crying. She started talking the moment I walked in, and I let her go for a while before I told her I had already spoken to a solicitor. That stopped everything cold. Wow, guys, the hairs on my neck are standing up. You are not shouting. You are not accusing. You are just saying, here is what I know, and I have already left. 11 phone calls in one night. She knew exactly what she had walked into, and still thought calling 11 times was going to change something. I would not have lasted the drive, honestly. Reading it once would have been enough for me. Printing 7 months of messages in date order and then quietly walking out the door, that takes a kind of emotional stillness most people do not have access to in that moment. Right, this next one hits differently because it does not land on one person. It lands in the middle of a whole family. My mom accidentally sent me the proof. I am an only child, and my parents have always been the kind of couple other people pointed to. Solid, consistent, still holding hands at dinner after 30 years together. I grew up thinking that was just who they were, and I had never once had a reason to question it. I was 24 when my mom sent me a forwarded message chain by mistake. She was trying to send something to her sister, and she hit my name instead. The chain was between my dad and a woman I had never heard of. It went back years. Not months, years. I read the whole thing standing in my kitchen. It took about 20 minutes. By the end, I understood that this had been going on since before I turned 12. My entire teenage years. Every Christmas, every family holiday, every time I had looked at my parents together and thought, this is what a good marriage looks like. My mom did not know she had sent it to me. She had no idea. She went about her Tuesday afternoon completely unaware that I was standing in my flat reading proof that her marriage was not what either of us thought it was. I spent 3 days trying to decide what to do. 3 days of normal phone calls with her while carrying this thing. If I said nothing, she might never know. If I said something, her whole world changed. And either way, my dad had chosen every single day to keep going. I told her. I rang her on the Thursday and said I needed to come over because I had received something by accident and she needed to see it in person. She knew from my voice something was wrong before I even arrived. I sat with her while she read it. I do not have words for what it was like to be in that room. Could you imagine that feeling? Oh my God, guys. Her mom went about the rest of that Tuesday not knowing what she had just set in motion. And this person had to sit alone for 3 days, deciding whether to collapse her own mother's world. That is an impossible position to be put in by accident. 12 years. She grew up inside that. Every version of love and stability she built her understanding from was sitting on top of something that was not entirely real. That is a lot to have to recalibrate at 24. Stay with me on this next one because the specific detail is the entire story. She took me back to the same hotel. We had been married for 9 years. Not without difficulty, but genuinely happy for most of it. She planned our anniversary trip entirely by herself that year, which was unusual for her. She said she had found a resort she had always wanted to visit and wanted to do something special for us. I thought it was one of the most romantic things she had ever done. We went. It was a beautiful 4 days. Dinner on the terrace every evening, a coastal path we walked twice. There is a photograph from that trip I still cannot look at. 6 months later, when everything else unraveled, I found out she had been to that resort the year before. Not with a friend, not for work, with him. She had not just been unfaithful. She had taken us back to the same place, the same resort, the same terrace, the same coastal path, for our anniversary. I do not know how to explain why that specific detail broke something differently to everything else I found out that week. The affair was devastating, but the trip was something else. It was like she had taken something that was supposed to be ours and laid it directly over something that was already his. When I asked her about it, she said she had not planned it consciously, that she just loved the resort and wanted to go back. I think that explanation was almost worse than if she had said it was deliberate. There is no version of that answer that helps. We have an update, you guys! He returned to the thread a few weeks later and explained that he had moved out and filed for divorce. Mutual friends had tried to get them to talk and he had declined. He said there was no version of any conversation that changed the resort. No version of any conversation changes the resort. I think that is one of the most quietly honest things anyone wrote in any of these posts. And I believe she loved the resort. That almost makes it worse. She went there with someone else, loved the place, and then brought her husband back because she wanted to experience it again. Like he was interchangeable with the setting she wanted to return to. Okay, this next one I went back and read twice because the perspective is unlike anything else in this video. I was engaged when I met my husband. I am not posting this looking for absolution. I know what I did. I knew at the time, and I chose to bury it anyway. I just needed to say it somewhere after 15 years of carrying it quietly on my own. When I met my husband, his name is Paul, I was engaged to a man I had been with since university. 6 years together. The engagement had been expected by everyone, and I had said yes because I did not know how to say anything else. I met Paul at a work event, and something shifted in a way that had never happened to me before. Within 2 months, I was seeing him in secret. I ended my engagement without explaining why. I told my former fiancé, I will call him Mark, that I had changed and that I was sorry. I did not mention Paul. I did not tell Paul about Mark. I folded the whole thing up and put it somewhere I had no intention of opening again. Paul and I married 18 months later. It was a genuinely happy marriage. We have 2 kids, we built something real, and I never stopped being grateful for it, even when I was most aware of how it started. 15 years later, Mark found Paul on LinkedIn and sent him a message. Not to me, to Paul directly. He told him everything. Paul came home that evening and sat down across from me at the kitchen table and asked me something I had not prepared an answer for in 15 years, because I had told myself there was nothing left to prepare for. I told him the truth, all of it, the engagement, the overlap, why I never said anything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he stood up, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. That was 3 weeks before I posted. He was still in the house. We were still talking. But something had shifted in a way I did not yet know how to name. Nope, no way. I would have lost it, guys. This is the only confession in this whole video, and the 15-year gap between the thing and the moment it detonated is what makes it hit so differently to everything else. And Mark reaching out to Paul specifically, not to her, but to Paul on LinkedIn after 15 years. He wanted Paul to know, not her. That choice says a lot about what that original ending cost him, and how long he had been sitting with it. Alright, this one is going to sound like I am setting up a joke, and I promise you I am completely serious. My dog knew about it before I did. Bailey is a 3-year-old golden retriever, and up until about 8 months ago, the most notable thing about him was that he absolutely could not be in the same room as a vacuum cleaner. He is soft, loyal, and very easily startled. He is also, as it turns out, an excellent witness. I noticed it over maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Whenever my wife received a notification from a particular contact, I never knew the name, but I could tell from the preview it was the same person repeatedly. Bailey would react. Not bark, not go to the door, just lift his head and start wagging his tail in that slow, recognizing way he does when someone he already knows is close by. Bailey does not react to my notifications. He does not react to hers generally. But this one contact every single time without fail. I did not say anything to my wife because I did not know how to say it. I started paying close attention instead. The notifications came most often on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. She worked from home those days. I was in the office. I took a Tuesday off without telling her, drove around for an hour, parked 2 streets away, and waited. At about 1:30, I walked home. The front door was unlocked. I left. I walked back to my car, called my brother, and then called the solicitor. I did not go back inside. I did not need to. I collected some things the following day while she was out. When I came back to talk, I already had a folder of notes and legal advice behind me, and she knew from the moment she looked at me that I knew. He updated the thread about a month later. The divorce was filed and Bailey was staying with him. He also mentioned that the man had been to the house enough times that the dog had come to fully recognize him, which added its own specific layer to everything. Bailey knew him well. He had been there regularly enough that a golden retriever had learned to identify his notifications from across the room. That is not a one-time visit. That is a routine. And Bailey gets to stay with the person who deserved him most, which feels like the one completely correct outcome in this entire story. This next one is a slower burn, but when the moment of proof finally arrives, it is genuinely satisfying. She called me controlling, then I drove there. Right, so a bit of background before I get into this. My girlfriend and I had been together for about 2 years, and things had been slightly off for a month or so before any of this happened. Not in a dramatic way, just quieter than usual. I put it down to stress on her end and did not push it. We had a shared location feature on our phones, something we had both agreed to a while back, and I happened to check it one afternoon when I was going to suggest meeting for lunch. Her location showed her at a park about 20 minutes from her office. She had told me that morning she was going to be desk-bound all day with back-to-back meetings. I did not say anything that evening. I told myself there was probably an explanation and I was being paranoid. But I checked again the following Tuesday. Same park, same rough time of day. I brought it up gently and she went straight on the attack. She said I was tracking her obsessively, that it was controlling behavior, and that she needed to be able to move around without feeling monitored. I apologized. I actually apologized. But I kept thinking about it. 2 Tuesdays in a row at the same park at the same time when she said she was in back-to-back meetings. So on the 3rd Tuesday, I drove there myself. She was on a picnic blanket with a man I had not seen before. Not a colleague lunch, a picnic blanket. They were not doing anything I could technically photograph, but they did not need to be. I stood at the edge of the park long enough to be certain, and then I walked back to my car. I ended it that evening. I told her what I had seen, and I told her I was done. She tried to tell me it was not what it looked like. The audacity of calling someone controlling for checking a shared location app that both of them agreed to. And it worked. He apologized. She flipped it so completely that he came away feeling like he was the one with the problem. And the picnic blanket specifically. Not just in the same place, a picnic blanket. That is not a spontaneous coincidence. Those two had been doing Tuesday lunchtimes for a while. Honestly, the fact that he apologized in the middle of it and then still trusted his instinct enough to go check anyway. Good. Sometimes you have to let the gut win even when someone has just spent 10 minutes convincing you that it is wrong. Alright, brace yourself because this next one starts with genuine heartbreak and then goes somewhere nobody expected. I walked in and my brain said something terrible. Okay, so this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I need to get it out. The situation itself was not funny, and I was not trying to be funny. Something happened with my brain under extreme stress, and what came out of my mouth when I walked through that door is something I have not fully forgiven myself for. I came home at lunchtime to surprise my wife. We had been slightly distant that month, and I wanted to do something nice. I picked up food from her favorite place, texted nobody, and let myself in through the front door. The personal trainer was there. I will not describe in detail what I walked into. The context is enough. I stood in the doorway and my brain, instead of doing anything remotely useful, reached for wordplay. I said out loud that this was not working out. I did not plan it. It just came out. And the moment it left my mouth, I hated myself for it even more than I already did. Nobody laughed. Nobody said anything. I put the food on the counter, which I still cannot think about without wanting to disappear, and I walked back out. I sat in my car in the driveway for 15 minutes. Then I drove to a coffee shop and posted on Reddit because I did not know who else to tell, and I needed to put it somewhere before I completely fell apart. Look, the pun is objectively terrible, not even in an impressive way. It is exactly the thing that falls out of your mouth when your brain short circuits and grabs the nearest available word. It is genuinely the least of his problems from that day. But putting the food on the counter before walking out, he came to do something nice, and the muscle memory of the original errand just carried him one extra second past the moment everything changed. I cannot stop thinking about that image. I walked into a situation significantly less bad than this once, and my immediate response was to say something completely unrelated. I think when the brain cannot process what it is seeing, it just goes somewhere familiar for a second. This next one has almost no words in it, and somehow that is the whole point. I left the evidence on the coffee table. 21 years ago, I was married to a man I had trusted completely. We had a house, a routine, a life that felt settled in the way things get when you stop noticing them. I was not unhappy. I was just in it, the way you get in something after enough years together. I came home from work one afternoon and went to change the bed sheets. The underwear was there, not hidden in the sheets, just sitting there in our bed. I picked them up, looked at them, and placed them carefully on the coffee table. Then I wrote a short note that said, "These are not mine." I packed a bag and drove to my mother's house without calling ahead. My mother opened the door, looked at my face, and did not ask a single question. She put the kettle on and pulled out a chair for me. My husband paid every penny of the divorce himself. I have not heard from him or about him in 21 years. Not once. The composure of that exit is something I find genuinely remarkable. No confrontation, no shouting, just the evidence placed somewhere visible, and then she was gone. She did not give him the scene. She did not give him anything except the most minimal possible acknowledgement, and then she left. And the note. 3 words and then nothing. That is someone who already knew exactly what she was going to do before she finished writing it. Okay, this next one has a very different energy, and the logic being presented is so spectacular I nearly had to read it a second time to believe it. She explained why it technically did not count. We were in our 2nd year of university, and I thought we were solid. Not perfect, nobody is at that age, but genuinely committed. We had talked about moving in together after graduation. I had met her parents, she had met mine. It felt like something that was going somewhere real. I found out she had been sleeping with her ex-boyfriend for most of the semester. Not from her. From a friend of his who assumed I already knew and said something in passing that he could not pull back. I went back to our flat and confronted her, and she did not deny it. She sat down very calmly and explained her position. She said it did not count as cheating, because the specific physical acts she had performed with him were in a different category to the ones she performed with me. Therefore, by her logic, it was a separate activity and not technically infidelity. I stood in our kitchen and tried to locate the part of my brain that handles language because it had apparently gone entirely offline. I asked her to repeat it. She did, with the exact same calm, like she had been sitting with this reasoning for a while and was genuinely comfortable with how it held up. I broke up with her on the spot. I did not shout, I just said I was done, picked up my bag, and left. The sheer bafflement of it bypassed most of the grief for a while. The confidence required to present that argument to someone's face, that is not even gaslighting. Gaslighting requires some attempt at a shared reality. That is introducing an entirely new philosophical framework mid-relationship and expecting it to land without any pushback. And she had thought about it beforehand. This was not an impulsive excuse grabbed in the moment. She had sat with that logic, stress-tested it internally, decided it held, and delivered it without flinching. That is a prepared position she had been sitting on. Alright, last one, and this one has a family layer that turns the whole thing into something more complicated than just a cheating story. My brother married the woman who cheated on me. My ex and I were together for 5 years. I loved her, and I am not going to make that simpler than it was. 5 years is a long time, and I had genuinely thought we were heading somewhere, maybe moving in together, maybe more eventually. She had been cheating on me for a significant part of it. Going out with friends, coming home, acting completely normal. I found out through one of her friends who let something slip and could not pull it back. I ended it that same night. My family knew what happened, and they were as shocked as I was. For about 1.5 years, that was just a sad chapter that had closed. Then my brother, who had his own relationship at the time, broke up with his girlfriend. And then he started seeing my ex, the woman who had cheated on me for most of our relationship. He called me to tell me like it was information I might find mildly interesting. I told him it felt like a betrayal. He told me to grow up. He said he did not owe me anything and that their relationship had nothing to do with my history. My parents tried to stay neutral, which mostly meant asking me to let it go. They got engaged. They sent out invitations for a backyard wedding at our parents' house, and my brother asked the whole family to help set it up. I said no. My 2 sisters said no alongside me. My other brothers and my parents spent weeks trying to change our minds. My brother told me I was being childish and that I should just sit back and wait for her to cheat on him too. He said it like that was obviously the sensible position, like watching it happen inside your own family from the front row was the mature response. I asked him once how he would feel if I tracked down his ex and married her. He said it was different. He did not say how. He just said it was different and left it there. I did not go to the wedding. Neither did my sisters. My parents went, and I do not hold that against them. I held my ground, and I am still holding it. No explanation of how it is different. He knows there is no argument available to him. He just does not want to engage with the one he has already walked into. And there is no clean ending here. No dramatic moment, no apology, just a choice he made and a family that split around it and everyone carrying on. That is sometimes just how it goes. Alright, that is every single story in this one, and honestly, that last one is a good place to land because there is no tidy resolution, and that feels about right for this whole video. If any of these had you actually speechless, drop it in the comments along with stories you'd like for me to read next. Until next time, you guys.